Good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners agenda setting work session for Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. It's 9:01 a.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. We have Vice Chair Commissioner Gary Edwards and Commissioner Carolina Mejia, as well as County Manager Mero Chavez and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. For public attendance, you may follow along on Thurston County YouTube channel or by conference call at 360-252-9020. The PIN is 1234. First item, as per usual on our Tuesday morning, is a COVID-19 update.
Good morning, Commissioners. Shelley Slaughter, Director of Thurston County Public Health and Social Services. Today is day 412 of Thurston County's COVID-19 response. And we do have some encouraging news to share. We are now in phase 3, as is all of the rest of Washington State. So that's very, very encouraging to be at this point as we continue to see our cases decline here in Thurston County. In Washington State, there have been 355,986 cases of COVID-19, with 5,183 Washingtonians that have lost their lives. That includes 7,616 Thurston County residents and 75 deaths here in Thurston. These cases put us currently at 86.8 on the governor's risk assessment dashboard over the last 14 days for our population size. Hospitalizations to date are 346 people here in Thurston County. Currently in the west region of Thurston, Lewis, Pacific, and Grays Harbor, 80.9% of our hospital beds are occupied, 6.7% of those acute beds with COVID patients, and 10.5% of our ICU capacity currently occupied by people with COVID. Our test positivity rate is 2.8%. As of yesterday. And I do want to remind people that at the end of this week on March 31st, Providence Medical Group and Providence Health and Services of Southwest Washington will be standing down the drive-through site in Hawks Prairie, but I wanted to reassure the community that we do have adequate testing available. We can increase that if needed. And we have community-based testing that Thurston County Public Health and Social Services offers throughout the week at multiple sites, including today at Rochester Organization of Families from 10 to 1. And we really encourage people to get tested if they've been exposed or are experiencing symptoms. Pivoting to vaccine news, to date here in Thurston County, we're getting close to a really important milestone. 99,212 Thurston County residents have been vaccinated to date. So we expect to cross over to 100,000 Thurston County residents vaccinated later this week. That's 23.9% of our residents that have initiated vaccine or had a first dose, and 14% that are now fully vaccinated. This week, our Thurston County region expects to be allocated 7,500 first doses and 3,910 second doses. That's for all providers in Thurston County. That does not include federal pharmacy allocations, so we have even more vaccine available than that. Thurston County Public Health and Social Services will receive 4,700 doses over this next week. This last week, we had a lot of success at our mass vaccination events at South Puget Sound Community College, vaccinating 4,703 people. So that was very wonderful. We were supported by many amazing staff and volunteers. We had over 384 volunteers support our successful events over this last week. And we learned that United Way has over 1,700 community volunteers standing ready to help assist us as we expect to increase vaccines here in Thurston County with additional supply. This next week, we do plan to operate mass vaccination sites at South Puget Sound Community College on Wednesday and Friday, and the Thurston County Fairgrounds on Saturday and Sunday. We encourage people to check our Thurston County Public Health and Social Services website, as well as Vaccine Finder and findyourphase.org. And I'm going to pivot to Dr. Abdelmalik for the next portion. For this, we do want to share with the board that we have received notice that 2 Thurston County residents have that tested positive for COVID-19 we found that those strains were variants of concern. And with that, I'll pass it to Dr. Abdelmalik to share more.
Good morning, commissioners. While we've made a lot of gains in addressing the pandemic here in Thurston County, we did receive notice that 2 Thurston County residents have tested positive for the B1351 variant, which was first detected in South Africa. These variants are picked up both through ongoing surveillance, looking at S-drop mutations, and then following through, as well as so that's generally the way these things get picked up. The sequencing process takes 3 to 4 weeks, so all of those affected are out of their infectious period at this time. This really highlights the need for all of us to continue with the mitigation measures, regardless of vaccination status, of maintaining 6 feet or more distance from folks not in our households and not in the specific circumstances addressed by the CDC guidance in private households, as well as stay home when we're sick, get tested regardless of vaccination status when we're sick, and continue hand washing and respiratory hygiene. At this time, what we know about the B1351 variant is that it is likely more transmissible than the wild type variant that we've had. However, that increase in transmissibility hasn't yet been quantified. There is no current evidence that it increases disease severity. There is some evidence, however, that antibodies either formed, that antibody treatments are less effective against this strain, and there may be some reduced efficacy from vaccines against this strain. However, all of the available vaccines do have a significant amount of protection against it. What we're looking at is a small reduction in efficacy, but there is still protection present in the currently available vaccines. So this is a strain that has been in the U.S. And detected in the U.S. since January of this year. The CDC and DOH continue to monitor the spread of this strain. I believe so the one true best way to minimize the risk of variants and minimize the risk of new variants is to prevent transmission. And so just all of the things we've been doing since the beginning that I listed previously are just as important today as they were over a year ago when we started this mission. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have.
Commissioner Mejia, anything for Shelley or Dr. Abdelmalik?
Yes, I do. I'll try to keep my questions to a minimum. First question is, who's currently available to vaccinate? And those, the clinics that you're having on Wednesday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday, are they by specific groups, or is it just open to anyone who qualifies?
So the clinics that we have on Wednesday Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are open to anyone who is currently in phase. And I do want, I'm just wondering in terms of who's available, I would love to answer your question about who's available to vaccinate, if you wouldn't mind clarifying it for me.
Yeah, so who can vaccinate? Who's currently qualifies in the phase to vaccinate?
Oh, okay.
Phase.
So right now we are vaccinating, of course, phase 1A, phase 1B, tier 1. So of course, healthcare workers that haven't gotten vaccinated yet, all first responders, the long-term care facilities, folks who live and work in long-term care facilities, folks over 65, folks in multi-generational households, 50 and older. What got added, so educators and childcare workers, so K-12 educators and childcare workers are in phase. We were really happy to be able to move tier 2 up almost a week. It was supposed to begin on March 22nd. And we were able to start vaccinating that group on March 17th, which is really encouraging. So that includes folks that work in critical infrastructure congregate settings, so agriculture workers, grocery store workers, food bank workers, groups, folks in those workspaces. The specifics can be found on the DOH website, in addition to pregnant individuals over age 16. Just a reminder, only Pfizer can be administered for individuals 16 and older. Both Johnson & Johnson and Moderna are only approved for individuals 18 and older, as well as individuals with individuals 16 and older with disabilities that increase risk of severe outcomes from COVID-19, or individuals with a disability that may not in and of itself increase risk for COVID-19, but they have another comorbidity that does. So we have done some outreach to folks with in the disability community to try to help them get vaccinated, as well in some of our recent clinics.
Thank you. My second question is in regards to this new variant. Is there something that we can do to take precautions? Do we need to, is just cloth mask okay, or, is it better to wear an N95 mask? What's the precautions that people should take with the new variant?
So the new variants do spread the same way that the wild type virus did. So it's through droplets and aerosols. So in terms of masking, the masking precautions remain the same. The CDC did issue guidance on optimizing your mask wearing. So more layers is better than fewer layers, and a tight fit is better than a looser fit. In terms of N95s, it's still important to reserve those for healthcare workers who are taking care of active patients at close range. And folks, in that close range setting, there isn't a recommendation for the general public to be using N95s. And even as health officer, I've been using a combination of disposable masks and at times cloth masks in alignment with the CDC guidance.
Thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
Yes, I'd like to just clarify something with, I think Shelley said something about we're going to be at about 100,000 residents and have been vaccinated here in Thurston County, maybe later on in this week. And you said it was 23%. I'm curious if if only adults are allowed to be vaccinated at this point in time, why wouldn't we be getting closer to 50% of our vaccination possibilities being accomplished? I'm just curious about that 23% number if we're close to 100,000 that have been vaccinated.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. You are correct that it is only adults right now that are currently eligible. And I think that in terms of that data, it is 99,212 vaccinations that have been administered in Thurston County, with 23.9% of eligible people initiating their first dose that are Thurston County residents. So people do get vaccinated outside of Thurston County, and those who administer vaccine in Thurston County can also serve out-of-county residents. So I will make sure that I get more detailed data for you and share that next week so you can see the better breakdown of numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, just the math, I guess, is what Commissioner Edwards is following up on. We only have 291,000 people, so 99,000 is, even with kids, is way more than 23%, but whatever, figure out that percentage.
May I offer a little bit of focus or a little bit of clarification? It's a little over 99,000 vaccine doses administered to Thurston County residents.
Oh, some are two to the same person.
Yeah.
Second dose.
So that's so we've got roughly 68,000 who've initiated, roughly 33,000 that have completed a full course, and that includes some Johnson & Johnson that we've had in our county.
That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, thanks, guys. We're going to move on to item 2. Yeah, sorry, Ramiro.
No, could I just ask Shelley to put a plug for United Way and also the volunteers associated with the helping us manning the different clinics?
Yes, absolutely. I did want to reiterate that tremendous thanks to our entire community for stepping up to support us in operating all of our vaccine sites and getting Thurston County vaccinated. United Way of Thurston County has done a tremendous job in recruiting over 1,700 people. It takes about 90 volunteers and staff to operate each event. As we scale up, we are going to need even more volunteers. So we really encourage people to check out the United Way of Thurston County website and sign up to help. We really appreciate it. And if you are a medical personnel interested in helping to be a vaccinator or help with other medical aspects, please visit our Thurston County Public Health and Social Services website under the Medical Reserve Corps. So that's how people can get engaged to help out. And again, I just want to say thank you so much, as well as all of our partner organizations that are working with us. Dr. A mentioned our outreach to the disability community, and Morningside partnered with us. We have many other community partners and expecting to do clinics not only at the South Puget Sound Community College and Thurston County Fairgrounds, but more community-based clinics with our nonprofit partners as well coming soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly. Is that it, Ramiro?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to item 2, homeless strategies update with Keely Marino.
Good morning, Keely Marino with Public Health and Social Services. I don't have much to report today. A lot of the last week has been spent in meetings, planning various things, such as working out the work plan for the homeless crisis response system this year. We're in the midst of that, as well as some hazardous weather event staffing, just really spending a lot of time in meetings, planning various efforts related to homeless crisis response. And later on this morning will be Tom Webster and myself will be presenting on scattered site proposals. So I'll leave that for that time. Otherwise, I'm just open to questions that you may have for me.
Anything for Keely? Commissioner Mejia?
No, sir.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Okay, neither. Thank you, Keely. Let's
Great,
take it
thank you.
later.
Okay, sounds good.
So item 3 is to review the draft agenda for this afternoon's board meeting. The meeting will be called to order at 2 p.m. Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Commissioner Mejia. Review of the agenda and board meeting minutes from March 16th. Opportunity for the public to address the board. County Manager, anything to bring to our attention on that?
Yes, Commissioner, you received an email from Mr. Pettit this morning that he will be testifying this afternoon on a couple of issues, one of which is an upcoming briefing related to traffic impact fees. And that's the only public testimony that I am aware at this point.
Questions or comments or additional input from the board? Okay. Then we would have County Manager update, item 2.
See, I was trying to follow up with Ms. Dilworth, testimony that she provided last week. I don't know if I'm going to be ready to provide a response this afternoon. I'm going to see if she mentioned that perhaps she has filed a formal complaint, so I need to get into the details of that. So if I'm ready to provide a response this afternoon, I will. If not, I will have it for next week.
Okay, thank you. Consent agenda, we have items A through D. 3A is appointment to the Agritourism Advisory Committee.
Yes, Commissioners, for you can, sorry.
I was just going to say, it looks like we have A and B are also both agritourism appointments.
Yeah, for your consideration is item 3A to appoint Mr. Josh Stottlemyre to the Agritourism Advisory Committee, and this appointment will be from March 1st, 2021 through January 31st, 2023. And item 3B is to reappoint Ms. Nine Critchfield to the Agritourism Advisory Committee as well, and the term will be from January 1st, 2021 through January 31st, 2023.
Okay, any questions from the board on these 2 appointments?
No, sir.
Put a 3C. Thank you. The 3C is reappointment to Agricultural Advisory Committee.
Yes, another reappointment, in this case for Ms. Pat Levine. Well, I think it's Mr. So to the Agricultural Advisory Committee. And this is as a former member, and the term will be from March 15, 2021 to March 15, 2023.
Questions on this?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, good to go. And then anything from the board on item 3D, which is the voucher list? Hearing nothing. Okay. Item 4, Medic One agreement with Olympia Fire Department for fire department vehicle repair and maintenance services.
Yes, Commissioners, you reviewed the item last week, and this is related to a renewal of a multi-year agreement with the Olympia Fire Department for the maintenance and servicing of Medic One EMS vehicles. The purpose of this agreement, again, is a renewal with the City of Olympia through the Olympia Fire Department to provide maintenance repair services to Thurston County Medic One for paramedic unit apparatus owned and operated by Thurston County Medic One. Thurston County Medic One does not have the sufficient resources to provide the services, and this has been an ongoing partnership with the Olympia Fire Department and the City of Olympia to provide those maintenance and repair services. This agreement will run from through December 31st, 2022. Kurt Harding is here to answer any additional questions you may have.
Okay, questions? Commissioner Mejia, anything on this item?
No, sir.
Commissioner Edwards?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. I'm good. Item 4B also involves Kurt. It's setting a public hearing for ordinance relating to property taxes for Medic One emergency medical care and services.
Yes, Commissioners, for your consideration is to set the public hearing for March 13, 2021, 3 p.m. soon thereafter, and here at the courthouse in room 280 for you to receive public testimony related to an ordinance for the Board of County Commissioners to put a ballot measure in front of the voters on the special election of August and the primary election August 3rd, 2021. As a matter of background, back in 1974, the voters of Thurston County authorized Medic 1 levy through a periodically authorized the levy since. In 1999, the voters made this levy permanently. So this has not been updated or requested to the voters since 1999. And it is pretty evident the shortfall is projected in Medic 1 in the future, which can jeopardize the services that we provide to the citizens related to Medic 1. Over the last few years, I believe the Medic 1 staff, including Kurt as the Director of Emergency Services, as well as the EMS Council, have made a fantastic job in making sure they check in always the ending fund balance. They don't go over in terms of their activities. But just the sheer nature of conducting the business and the sheer inflation on conducting the business just creates a pressure on the fund, and it's time to ask the voters to continue to support this. So the August 3rd primary ballot election is for the levy lift and to restore the Medic 1 levy to the previously voted approved in the amount of 50 cents per $1,000 of assessed valuation of the properties. And I will leave it there and to have Kurt Hardin to elaborate in further, or for the board to have any questions of him.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioners. Kurt Hardin, Director of Emergency Services. The County Manager, Romero Chavez, just gave a great summary of this public hearing, and I will have additional information to start the public hearing if you set that for April.
Questions for Kurt? From the board. Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, I'd have one. Kurt, was this a recommendation from EMS?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Edwards, this was a unanimous recommendation from the EMS Council to the Board of County Commissioners to place this ballot measure in August. And this public hearing is just a step towards that discussion and decision.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mejia, anything?
No, sir.
Kurt, can you explain, and or Ramiro, either one, but when Ramiro made that point about restoring the previously set, levy at 50 cents, I think is what he said. Can you explain what that means for people that don't quite understand that?
Sure. Previously, the voters authorized the Medic 1 levy at 50 cents per $1,000, and that's in accordance with state statute. Over the years, the amount by law of the revenue that's collected has been 1% plus new construction above the previous year. So medical expenses, medical inflation has been higher than that. It's averaged 5% a year over the last 10 years. So therefore the millage, the 50 cents per $1,000, has been dropping down steadily over the years. And now it stands at 28.9 cents per $1,000, but the cost of doing business has been increasing approximately 5% a year over the last 10 years.
Robin?
Part of the reason that the price per $1,000 has been going down is property values have been going up at a rate greater than 1% per year. And the amount you can raise the levy is it's capped at 1% per year. So instead of 50 cents per $1,000, with the growth in the assessed value, the amount per $1,000 has gone down. And Kurt, what is it currently?
28.9 cents this year.
Just under 29 cents per $1,000. That's the amount it has deteriorated over time because property values have gone up.
So in essence, what is the voters, if they approve, they will set a new baseline based on the property values. If that help explain this.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you think about your property taxes, it's either an increase or it's not an increase. I just kind of wanted to show that nuance because a lot of people don't quite track that, what it means. restoring a previous rate that had been previously approved by the voters, but hasn't been able to keep up with the value in properties.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That takes care of 4B.
Just one more additional piece of information for the viewing public as to why the board is considering holding a public hearing now for a potential ballot measure in August of this year. Is because we need to submit any particular ballot measure to the auditors by May of this year. So going back, and that is giving the board enough time to exercise your legislative authority, provide public hearings, and then it's based on the public testimony for you to consider taking an action. That is the reason why we're having this public hearing for your consideration today. There is some specific deadlines that we need to meet with the county auditor in submitting this ballot measure if the board approves it.
Okay, thank you, Ramiro. That takes care of item 4. Item 5 is the county manager's section, which is standing items on board reports and our combined schedule. So a pretty light agenda this afternoon compared to recent meetings. 3 p.m. though, we'll have a public hearing from the Auditor's Department regarding precinct boundary changes and county commissioner district legal descriptions. We've had a couple of briefings on this, but Ramiro, is there anybody from Auditor we need to address?
Yeah, Commissioners, the county auditor provided a briefing related to this particular proposal. And this is what I think I call a maintenance based on the variations of population. And the intent of this is to balance the population among all the many different precincts that we have here in Thurston County. The results of that created some boundary changes on 11 precincts and also created a new precinct. And again, we intend is to balance the population among all the different precincts. And also, as a result of that, creates the revisions, small revisions on the county commissioner district number 1. Those are the 2 items that you will be receiving public testimony this afternoon. I will ask you, obviously, to close the public hearing after you hear the public testimony and for your consideration. And not necessarily have to take an action, is for you to adopt the 2 ordinances of the revisions of the 11 districts, as well as create a new one, and also an ordinance changing the legal description of county commissioner district number 1. The second motion is for your consideration, depending on the public testimony.
Okay, anything from the board regarding the public hearing?
Yes.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Will we have a map up here for the public to see, or is there a map maybe available online or something in case someone has an interest in this particular topic? I would just think about elections.
Yeah, the county auditor will provide as part of the staff presentation, and they will share a map, I believe, as part of their presentation. They will describe the different changes of the different districts. So the public will be able to see those changes prior to you taking public testimony.
I guess my question is it available now so they could look at it?
Yes.
So they can look online somewhere?
Yeah, all the documentation has been available in the last few days during the public comment period.
Thank you.
Anything, Commissioner Mejia?
No, sir.
Okay. Then that will wrap up this afternoon's meetings and hearings. So we'll move to review of next week's proposed agenda for Tuesday, March 30th, 2020. Meeting called to order at 2 p.m. Pledge of allegiance to be led by Vice Chair Edwards. Review of the agenda and board meeting minutes from today. Presentation at 2:05 from Public Defense regarding introduction of new Public Defense employees.
Yes, Commissioner, before we go through this agenda, as you will see, this agenda is pretty light next week. We only have 1 department item from Public Works. Certainly you can hold and we don't have any public hearings. I'd just like to add the question whether you'd like to continue with the meeting maybe bring some items for today's meeting as part of the consent agenda items after you review, or maybe delay a couple of items for the following week of board meeting, just as a note of discussion.
Okay, well, let's review the consent items and then the board can sort of see what's in there and we can figure out if that's the pleasure of the board. But keep that in mind as we go through these items.
Right. So,
Public defense presentation of employees, anything to be said there?
Patrick O'Connor, the Director of Public Defense, he will be introducing to the board Virginia Langstrom, and she is Defense Attorney number 2, and Sky Friesen, Defense Attorney number 2. This is an effort for the board to welcome new employees to the county, and for the new employees to give the opportunity to meet with the board on this setting.
Okay. Opportunity of the public to address the board, which you probably wouldn't know what's coming at this point. County manager update. You might have something with Ms. Dilworth, I presume, if we don't do it today. Anything else there, Ramiro?
Nothing that I'm aware at this point.
Okay, then let's look at our consent items and see what is there. The beginning is 3A, franchise agreement with Astound Broadband.
Yes, Commissioner. For your consideration is for you to approve a resolution granting a non-exclusive franchise agreement to Astound Broadband LLC to construct, operate, and maintain telecommunications facilities in Thurston County. As a matter of background, the board approved to hold a public hearing on the application from Astound Broadband LLC. That public hearing was held on December 1st, 2020, and that was under RCW 3655-040. At that point, the board did not receive any public testimony, and as a result of that, the board approved the application for a franchise utility franchise agreement. As a result of the board approving the application for Astound Broadband, also gives direction to staff to start negotiating the details of this franchise agreement. That negotiation has been completed. The prosecuting attorneys have already reviewed this proposal, and this is for you to consider taking an action, and again, granting a non-exclusive franchise to operate and maintain telecommunications facilities in Thurston County. In this, there is not really a financial transaction between the utilities. It's just a way to manage how they operate in the counties right away, and as well as how the utilities may need to relocate at their own cost if the county needs to utilize portions of that right away.
Mr. Mejia, anything here?
No, sir.
Mr. Edwards?
I guess I'd just like to have the county manager, you've already mentioned that there's not going to be any fee structure one way or the other connected with this, but this does become a benefit to the citizens of Thurston County, doesn't it?
Right, absolutely provides a benefit because it gives the opportunity for those utilities to continue to provide services to the citizens of the county, and without having to secure private easements. And that is the key of the franchise agreements, to allow them to be in the county right away. And also the franchise agreement provides a well-defined rules of engagement, roles and responsibilities from both parties as to how they operate in the counties right away.
Thank you.
So Ramiro, is there a time issue with this? If we were to, do we need to move it forward if we didn't want to have a meeting on the 30th, or could we push it back a week? What is that?
I don't believe there is a time issue, but I will ask Robin if she likes to weigh in on this. Either we can move it to today. I think the item is ready for your consideration today, or we can delay it for a week. Your call.
Either is fine. I'm sure that we have, we've held the public hearing. There were no comments. This company has been waiting for some time for this franchise, so my preference would be to move it to today, but if you were to delay it a week, that would be okay too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 3B is emergency services contract for EMPGS grant E20257.
Yes, the commissioners approved last year a grant from the Washington State Emergency Management Division in the amount of $43,778. On that action, also the board approved for the director to approve any changes within the 10%. We just realized that the same funding source is going to be given, allocated to the county an additional $10,504. And that is for the COVID supplemental allocation process related to the COVID-19 emergency. That puts the total cost to $54,282, which is beyond the 10% authority the director had to execute this agreement. That is really the purpose of this. And again, the 10% is something within the procurement policy that we have. And sometimes that authority, the additional money goes beyond that authority of 10%. So to give you additional background on this particular funding will assist emergency management offices with the ongoing COVID-19 public emergency by purchasing and installing technology equipment that will enhance the use of the Emergency Coordination Center, the ECC, facility for activation exercises and meetings. And this has been proven to be extremely helpful during this COVID-19 emergency, as the Public Health and Social Services staff and the IMT have utilized these facilities in order to be an effective response in terms of the environment. So Kurt Harding is here to answer any questions related to this item.
Morning, Commissioners. Kurt Hardin.
Okay. Welcome back, Kurt. Commissioner Mejia, anything for Kurt?
Is there any match back with this grant? Or is
Commissioner Mejia, there is a match, but it's what we call a soft match. So what the county emergency management budget already has in place from the general fund is sufficient to meet this match.
Thank you.
Is that as an in-kind services, right?
In-kind services, correct.
So in-kind services defined for the most part by staff time.
Correct.
No, please clarify, Robin.
No, in-kind services are anything that the county does not pay for. If it's staff time, it's a cash match.
Okay. But we have sufficient emergency management fund, general fund to have that match that takes place.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Commissioner Edwards? Anything?
No, sir.
Okay, I'm good as well. Thank you. Item 3C, development review, execute license and indemnity agreement for private septic line. Sounds like some Lake stuff.
Yeah. So, commissioners, you reviewed the item previously, the franchise agreement, and that is with the utility company to operate utilities within the county's right of way. This particular item is related to the license and amenity agreement, which allows individual property owners to use the county's right of way for their own private use. In this particular case, there is is pursuant to RCW 3656040 of the Thurston, is the Thurston County Code 1356040. And this is a request from Mr. David and Ms. Katrina Field. They have been applied to cross a portion of the Summit Lake Road at approximately milepost 2.153. And the reason as to why they need to cross this particular road is because they own property on both ends of the road, and allow them to cross the roadway will allow them to utilize their property on both sides of Summit Lake. This is something that the board has approved in the past. I just want to give additional background for Commissioner Mejia. This is I don't want to call it a common practice, but this is an instrument for individual property owners to request crossing any county road for particular use, in this case, a private use. Todd Munson is here to answer any questions related to this proposal.
Yes, good morning, commissioners, and thank you, Manager Chavez, for the great introduction and summary. If you guys have any questions on this, be more than happy to answer.
Commissioner Mejia,
No questions.
Commissioner Edwards.
No, sir.
Is this
All
a
right,
new,
thank you.
this is at least the third time I've seen something like this. Is this just a new project from a new citizen, or are these somehow related to previous projects that we considered?
Yeah, no, they're not related to the previous ones. And yeah, in the last year, we had one about a quarter of a mile south of this and another one, half mile north. And so the Summit Lake area, we have actually quite a few of these through the years because it's small lots alongside the lake and then the roads right behind them. So for their septic systems, whether it's a new project or a failing septic, the suitable soils are across the road and upland. And so therefore, these applicants need to cross the road with their septic lines. So, but we do see them in other areas of the county because any time that somebody needs to cross right-of-way, whether it's opened right-of-way or unopened right-of-way, then we ask for these license and indemnity agreements.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Item 3D, fiscal management appointment to solid waste advisory committee.
Yeah, for your consideration, commissioners, is for you to consider appointment Mr. Steve Purcell as the town of Yokota representative to the Thurston County Solid Waste Advisory Committee for the term of March 2021 to March 2024. This has been at least a good effort because in the past, the town of Puget has not been part of the SWAC committee, and staff has made an effort to reach out to all the small towns in South County to make sure that they have representation on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. So I'm pleased to introduce this as a recommendation from the town of Yokota for you to consider appointment of Mr. Steve Purcell.
Anything from the board?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, very good. And 3E is voucher list, which you'll have to review or postpone a week. And then we've got item 4, which you said was the one department item on this proposed agenda, and it is a resolution called for sealed bids for furnishing a supply of various asphalt materials.
Yes, Commissioner, this is an item from Public Works, and this is a yearly request the board sees for you to consider authorizing the call for sealed bids to secure various kinds of asphalt materials for the annual road operations maintenance work that we do. It is important for us to secure those prices early in the year because, as you know, asphalt materials tend to fluctuate rather rapidly during the year. So going through this bidding process has been proven very effective in the past to secure an actual cost that we can manage the expenditures, manage the work through the year. And as you know, even right now, the oil prices are changing almost daily. So, and again, this strategy seems to be very helpful just to have a good sense of expectation as to what the price will be for us to conduct the needed maintenance operations on our county roadways. Lucy Mills, the manager for road operations, is here to answer any questions.
Morning, Lucy. Questions, Commissioner Mejia?
So just for my clarification, this is something we do on a yearly basis just to get bids on the asphalt we'll need for road repairs?
Yeah, that is correct. So when we secure the bids, is specifically how much a ton per asphalt will cost us. So secure a vendor that will guarantee that price for the rest of the year, as an example.
Oh, so it's something that will guarantee the price for the rest of the year?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But Lucy can elaborate on that in my response.
Yes, there is a clause in the contract that if, for example, oil prices skyrocket, there is some mechanism for them to submit a request to change that, but that is a process through the contract that we would negotiate.
How about if it's the other way around, Lucy, where they plummet?
again, they can resubmit information and then reduce their bid amount as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Edwards?
I guess the only thing I'd say, it sounds like time is of the essence as the price of oil fluctuates. So I don't see anything on here that we couldn't move to today.
Right.
So I'll just comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, well, the last piece of the agenda is obviously the standing items. So I guess the question then that Ramiro posed is whether we would want to move items forward and cancel the meeting for the 30th. Move items forward and backwards as appropriate. Is that acceptable to the board? Any concerns about that? I'm okay with it, but I'd like to hear. Commissioner Edwards, any thoughts about the meeting on the 30th?
No, I feel we can consolidate it to today's meeting. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mejia?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Edwards. I feel they can be consolidated to today.
Okay, so we've agreed to not have the meeting on the 30th. Then the question is there any item, sounds like we want to move most things forward till today. Is there anything, Ramiro, you would suggest that we move backward to the?
So Commissioners, the only item they may be delayed for a week, it will be the introduction of the new employees for Office of Public Defense, and that really doesn't have a critical timeline. I believe the rest of the items on the agenda can be moved to today. I believe they're ready, and for your consideration, that will be my proposal.
The vouchers, of course, probably would go backwards a week.
We can do that if you like additional time to review that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then it looks like everything else we move.
Okay.
Folded into today's hearing.
Just to confirm, items 3A, B, C, and D will move to today's meeting. Items 3E will move to the following week. And item 4A will move to today's meeting, and the presentation will delay for a week.
Right, and those are all but one are consent items, so it really won't add much to today's.
Right.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Lucy, did you hear that your item is going to be up this afternoon?
Yes, I'll be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, great. Then item 5 for today's agenda is proclamations and awards.
Good morning, Amy Davis, clerk of the board. There are no proclamations for review, but just to notice that the proclamation for Child Abuse Prevention Month will take place during the April 13th Board of Health meeting.
We'll have a chance to review that at a later time, Amy.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for Amy on proclamations and awards?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Advisory boards and commissions, item 6.
There are no applications for review today.
Okay, that's easy enough then. PIO check-in, item 7.
Good morning, Commissioners. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor. Commissioner Mejia launched our first Coffee with Commissioner episode on Monday. She held an interview with Jenica Machado, our Economic Development Manager, to discuss the economic development in Thurston County, along with how Thurston Strong supported the county during the COVID response. So far, the videos had more than 70 views, which is great. If you missed it, you can watch it on the county's YouTube page. Up next is Commissioner Menser, and his will record in late April. I presented to the Regional Housing Council last Thursday on the activities of the communications team. I'm currently in the process of updating the Regional Housing Council's website and developing a communications plan with a focus on the first 6 to 8 months being establishing the Regional Housing Council's identity. So talking about the who, the what, and the why. Then we'll move on to the how once the council develops its plan. And then lastly, we completed a staff survey around internal communications. The survey went out to the county's through the county's internal newsletter, the Insider in February and March. We had 47 responses. While that's only about a 4% response rate, the results are still really useful for us and provided us with some really good information. We're compiling the data and working on an executive summary, which we will provide to you when it's finished. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
Questions from the board for Megan?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8 is legislative update.
Thank you, Commissioners. In your packet is included an updated report for all the bills on this current legislative session. I am not going to walk you through each one of them. I'd just like to highlight a couple. One is on page 4, and that is Substitute House Bill 1258. That was related to concerning the operations authorizations and permitting of micro enterprise home kitchens. The current position by the board was in opposition of that it was in alignment with WASALFO. That is the Washington State Association of Public Health Officials. In the last couple days, and in fact, it has been a different variations with this particular bill. It was a proposed amendment. The WASALFO was supportive, and in fact, today was a public hearing related to hear those proposals. The legislature didn't cancel the public hearing, so it goes back. And if that public hearing would have occurred, WASALFO would have been in support of the strike out amendments. So since those amendments are not part of the public hearing this afternoon, WASALFO continues to oppose this bill related to the micro kitchens. That's an update on that one. And the other bill that I'd like to highlight with you to use on the last page, and that is Substitute Senate Bill 5368, which has passed the Senate, is currently in the House. So in this bill is related, it allows the code cities to annex unincorporated territories within the urban growth area. Commissioner Messer alerted me of this bill last week, so I had the chance to review it. And it seems to me that this is a complementary bill to what was passed a couple of years ago related to annexations. And the bill that we sponsored and we were successful 2 years ago was related to annexations. When a city annexes, we need to embark on an interlocal agreement to make sure that all that area is taken into account for both jurisdictions impacted by the jurisdiction. So this bill was introduced, and the second substitute bill to the bill is encouraging news, I believe. So let me read what this the substitute bill is, which passed the Senate with the substitution. And it says a code city may collaborate with the county or counties where the code city is located to form an interlocal agreement regarding annexations of unincorporated territory within the UGA boundary. An interlocal agreement for annexations will qualify the city for the annexation sales tax credit, and that is important. So this agreement must address the following: a balancing of annexations of commercial, industrial, and residential property so any potential loss or gain is considered and distributed fairly as determined by the tax revenue. Second, develop ownership and maintenance of infrastructure. That is also important, and the potential of revenue sharing agreements. The interlocal agreement formation process must include procedures for public participation, including opportunity for written comments and public hearings. That has not changed. So this really what it does, I believe this piece of legislation just complements the previous annexations in more prescriptive way as to how the interlocal agreement should take place between a city and a county. So based on my review, this is a good bill to support, and I pause right now to answer any questions the board members may have.
Commissioner Edwards, do you have questions on this?
I guess the only thing I'd ask is the association is supporting this then?
I believe WASAC is in support of this.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, okay.
Commissioner Mejia, anything?
No, sir.
I was just confused by this because it's funny because WASAC, like literally the morning I brought it up with Heroes, because I hadn't heard anything about it at the Legislative Steering Committee. And then 2 hours later, I had my Legislative Steering Committee meeting and it was like front and center. So apparently it wasn't really on WASAC's high priority list, but some of these changes that Ramiro described brought it to the top of the committee. Although nobody has really explained it to me, like what is it changing? Like what does it allow that isn't allowed now? I still don't have a really good sense of what this bill is doing.
So in the previous bill that passed 2 years ago, asked the jurisdictions impacted by the annexation to enter into a new local agreement.
It asked them to, or it required them to, or
it is given an avenue as one of the ways to how they communicate that. But that was a very high level, which is, it was an important piece of legislation, I believe. So this new bill, what it does is it provides prescription as to what elements should be included on the interlocal agreement. And the key on this is the tax revenue. So it prescribes how the interlocal agreement needs to address the tax revenue, whether it's a gain or a loss by those jurisdictions impacted by the jurisdictions that need to be included on that agreement, where the past legislation was not that prescriptive on the interlocal agreement. That is my evaluation of this particular piece of legislation.
And when the title of the bill, according to this chart, says encouraging rural economic development, I mean, what are they really getting at there?
So that's what probably went under the radar to most of us. Really, it's just it passed the Senate and it became part of is part of consideration in the House, and I think that's how I came up with, because the title was a little bit interesting.
Okay. Back to, I want to ask a question back on the previous one, 1258. When you said, I don't always know the legislative lingo as well as I probably should, but when you said there were going to be amendments offered that WASALFO could support, and then you said there was some kind of a hearing that was stricken, or what does that mean? Those amendments are not going forward, or they haven't gotten put on yet? What is the meaning of what you said?
Yeah, so that's my understanding. They proposed a strikeout and amendments that WASALFO provided to the bill. My understanding is that those will not be heard. So the bill is moving with no amendments.
Okay, so you were just saying that WASALFO tried to play ball and offer some amendments that could get them on board, but those were not taken up, so it's still objectionable.
Yeah, and in fact, our story was going to testify in support of the proposed changes this afternoon. So now that testimony is going to change a little bit based on WASALFO's position now.
Go ahead, Robin.
Just to jump in on legislative lingo, quite often you hear something about a striker amendment. Yeah. Normally, a striker amendment is an amendment that strikes the entire bill and replaces with new language. So it's usually a replacement of pretty much the whole bill, a striker amendment.
Is that what we're dealing with here? Like that was the proposal?
I have not been following this particular one. I don't know.
Yeah, the proposal for the most part is aligned with Robin has stated significant changes within the original bill.
Okay, from the board, any questions about any of the legislative items that you might like to ask or comment on at this point?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you, Ramiro. That takes us right to, I think we have time to cover maybe one more item before a recess. Let's go to item 9, the electronic signature policy.
Yes, Commissioner, this is a follow-up to the briefing that you received on March 17th last week related to 2 policies, the framework policy as well as the electronic signature policy. The staff provided feedback on these 2 policies, and the board decided to allow more time to the board members to review and provide comments. So far, I have not received any additional comments from the comments that we received on the briefing itself. So I will ask the board to give us direction on those 2 policies today.
I think it was Commissioner Edwards that had certain questions or concerns. I'll start with him then.
Yes, my concerns were that it was just too complicated for, I don't know why we just can't say we're going to follow the state law. I know we need to put together a policy, but it just seemed like it was more than is needed. It's kind of an example of a bureaucracy promoting itself somehow. I don't know why we just can't follow state law and say that's what we're going to do.
Commissioner Mejia, any concerns or questions or comments?
No, just to follow up on Commissioner Edwards' comment, isn't the state law that the counties have to write a policy?
Yes, that is correct.
Robin, looks like you're nodding.
Okay. So we can't refer to the state law, like it's basically referring back to us to write that policy, correct?
Yes, that is my interpretation of the state law, yes.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
I guess I'm not questioning the fact that we need a policy. It's just the extent of the policy. That's what my concern was, that it just seemed to be more than needed. That's all.
I will agree that there's a complexity. I think the last board got this, I want to say in November or December, and there were questions and I was confused about it. I think we got it kind of at the last minute, and so there wasn't even a chance to look at it, and I was confused by it. I think I understand how it's structured now in a way that I didn't before. It is kind of confusing, but I think that it's trying to be, I think as I pointed out last week, it's trying to be as less micromanaging of our various groups within the county as possible, and letting them kind of do things the way that works for them. So creating this umbrella that does that sounds it's a little esoteric sounding, but I haven't seen a credible alternative proposal, so I'm comfortable moving this forward and having it be adopted. I don't know if my seatmates are in agreement with that. What's the next step? Before I frame that question, Ramiro, what you need the board to give you thumbs up to do what? What would be the next step?
To bring an AIS for a future meeting for you to formally approve this policy.
Okay, we don't have to have a public hearing or whatever. We're just
no, sir.
Be on an agenda for approval at a 2 p.m. meeting.
No, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to propose that we have this put on the next available spot. Do I have second or third?
Okay, just because of the situation, I'm going to give a thumbs down at this point in time until we end up with I just don't see the rush. So that's just my position. I respect everybody else's position.
Okay, Commissioner Mejia, where are you?
Second.
Okay. Well, second, so it looks like you've got 2 commissioners supporting moving this forward, Ramiro.
Thank you. You will see an AIS coming up.
Okay, so it's 10:10. I'm going to propose a 15-minute recess. We'll be back at 10:25 to pick up basically commissioner items at this point. The first one will be Keeley and the RV scattered site pilot project.
Thank you, sir. And 3, 2, 1, go ahead.
Okay, we're back in session for the agenda setting work session for Tuesday, March 23rd. And we have reached the item 10 on the agenda for this morning. Commissioners' items, number 1 is RV scattered site pilot project. And Keely's here and Tom Webster. Ramiro, I'm going to pass it to you to pass it where it needs to go.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioners. And I'm going to take at least Commissioner Menser, Commissioner Edwards back a couple of months ago, maybe a little longer, in 2020, when we saw the need in that request from the City of Olympia to help and manage the RV parking on Ensign Road. That seems to be a precedent. The board authorized to contribute money towards this effort. And staff from the county as well as the jurisdiction start working on the plan as to how to address the current need. As you may recall, at some point we were contemplating to have a single point as to where we can probably offer for those RVs to move to, and that was the property located owned by the City of Olympia, located on Carpenter and Martin Way. Through the process, when I started working on the details of this particular approach, it became unfeasible in terms of timing as well as the cost. So staff embarked on having a different approach as to how we need to address the issue related to RV parking, particularly on Ensign Road within the City of Olympia. You heard maybe 3 weeks ago, the staff was working on this scatter site pilot project. And at that point, I suggested to the board to give a little time until all this concept is put together. And this is where staff is going to be briefing you in a little more detail as to what this pilot project is all about. Staff presented this proposal to the Regional Housing Council this past Tuesday on the monthly meeting. And the Regional Housing Council is in support of this pilot project. So with that in mind, without getting into the details of this project, welcome Tom, welcome Keely, and they will walk us through this proposal.
All right, great. Thank you, Commissioners. Tom Webster with Public Health and Social Services, along with Keely Marino. And so thanks for that excellent taking us back, Ramiro. I'm gonna pass it over to Keely to kind of continue that and to provide an overview of the pilot project that we're putting together. Keely and I have been working with the City of Olympia and the Regional Housing Technical Team to put this together. So I'm gonna have Keely kind of set a little more context and can provide an overview of what we're trying to accomplish with this pilot project. So Keely.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. So briefly, as Ramiro mentioned, where this project came from this need to address the number of individuals living aboard their vehicles along Ensign Road. One of the concerns that was brought up during this process was how many individuals are we going to actually be able to serve? One of the limitations on the Martin Way Carpenter Road, after we dug into it a little bit, was that there wasn't a huge number of individuals that could be served. Potentially, definitely under 40 vehicles could be served at that site, and I know that that was of great concern to the board. And so as we started bumping up against those walls, a new wall every time we got together to discuss it, it was mentioned that we should maybe think outside the box and find a way to meet the needs of individuals living aboard their vehicles, potentially even folks that are living in unsanctioned encampments, to both manage the site, meaning we know that the public and the board and other jurisdictions are very concerned about solid waste and hygiene and the availability of hygiene services to individuals living in these encampments, especially in lieu of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then also, how do we get these individuals into housing as quickly as possible? In lieu of there being a site that was identified that could meet the need to serve just those vehicles, and bring more vehicles that are scattered throughout the community that have folks living aboard them, we thought, let's bring the services to them. So we started discussing with the City of Olympia and other partners at the technical team, what would it look like to have a pilot program where we have a two-pronged approach where we have a site management element, meaning the hygiene, the garbage, the right-of-way, just keeping track of and managing that whole part of this pilot project. And at the same time, have a dedicated professional homeless service provider, case manager, and site governance manager body to come in and work with each individual encampment and each individual member of the encampment to do a number of things. One, to create some principles around self-governance, meaning that they have a code of conduct that they're expected to follow, that they're engaging in case management. And what that means, engaging in intensive case management, is that they're getting into coordinated entry, which means that they're getting fast-tracked onto the wait list for housing projects. They are getting access more swiftly to other items they might need. Identification being one of the main ones that individuals experiencing homelessness need help accessing. If they need treatment, if they need behavioral health treatment, they've got dedicated case management, skilled case management to come in and help them access those, and then walk with them along the way as they move into housing. This project would be also, the data would be collected and it would be entered into the homeless management information system data, into that system in order to access the data to demonstrate, was this pilot project successful? The people who were entered into the project, did they exit into permanent housing? Did they receive successful referrals into other services that they need? So it's measurable, and it is innovative, and it's an attempt to meet the needs, the growing need of both mitigating the solid waste and the concerns around hygiene, the public, the encampments and the jurisdictions, and as swiftly as possible, getting folks that need it that are living in those encampments into homes or housing. And I'll turn it over to you, Tom.
All right. Thanks for that, Keely. So in your packet, you should have a 3 or 4 page document that lays out this pilot model. And so Keely talked about the 2 key components of the site management piece and then the case management site governance piece. So in developing this model, one of the things we wanted to make sure was that this could be implemented anywhere in the county. Currently, we're working with the City of Olympia, but we wanted to make sure this model was replicable in Lacey or Tumwater or the unincorporated parts of the county as additional sites may be identified. So we've laid out kind of clear separations of what is the county's responsibility and then what would be that participating jurisdictions. Right now it's City of Olympia, but it could be another jurisdiction's responsibility. And so we've really kind of divided it with the county taking on the responsibility of procuring the services of a contractor or provider to carry out the site governance and case management component of this model and managing that contract. With the city taking lead responsibility for the site management. The city or jurisdiction would be responsible for procuring the solid waste and services, the hygiene services, the RV septic clean out services, and those other right-of-way kind of issues. And so that was kind of the separation that we decided on. We also talked about the county, however, providing a contribution to the jurisdiction to support the costs of the site management, so helping to pay for those costs. This is not expected to cover 100% of the costs for the site management, what's being proposed, depending on the size of each encampment or each site. But it's a start, and then the city would be responsible for any additional contribution beyond that amount. So that's kind of the core of this model of a shared between the county. And I want to emphasize these county resources we're talking about are really kind of those resources that the Regional Housing Council have oversight over. So these are local document recording fee, 2163 funds, potentially a community development block grant or emergency solutions grant. So these would not be county general funds going into this project, but those housing and homeless service dollars that come in, that's where the county is the fiscally responsible agent. So those are the types of funds we're talking about. So the proposed pilot project is to start at 3 sites. The initial locations would be vehicles along Ensign Road, the encampment off Deschutes Parkway, and then the encampments off of Wheeler Road. And the city and county and city of Olympia would implement this pilot project for a length of 12 months with a review after 6 months to determine if we need to make any changes to the program. And as Keely said, there'd be an emphasis on kind of reporting data and tracking, seeing if we're successful in getting people into housing. As Ramiro mentioned in his opening, back in, I believe it was October, the county did pledge approximately $530,000 of existing resources to go towards this effort based on the development of this project proposal for you. So we're really hoping this will take us for a year. As part of the RHC, also would like to commit some additional money if necessary, if that $530,000 is not sufficient, to put additional 2163 resources to ensure that we have funding for at least a year. Then we'll kind of evaluate how successful we are, and then hopefully we can continue this project in future years. So we just kind of wrap up in terms of what success looks like. We really do hope getting residents into coordinated entry, moving some residents into permanent housing solutions. We're not under the illusion that we're going to move everybody within 6 months into permanent housing, that there's a visible reduction of trash and debris, and hygiene services are available at the site, that sidewalks are passable. There's a reduction of conflict between residents, those types of things. I think it's also important to recognize that there may be people moving in and out of encampments. So there may not be an overall reduction in the number of people living in some of these encampments immediately. We hope long-term that's an objective, but there may not be a short-term immediate visual reduction. And then we're not going to pretend that it's going to eliminate all public complaints or eliminate all calls to law enforcement, but we hope to see a reduction in those things. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you have.
Commissioner Mejia.
I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, sir. When did we get this document that we're referring to right now?
It was, so we presented this to the Regional Housing Council last week, and so then we presented it to Amy. It went into your packet, I don't know, end of last week. I don't know if it was Friday or Monday when you actually received it. So this will be a new document for you that was just shared with the Regional Housing Council last week. So it is a new document.
So, okay, we haven't had time to go over this particularly other than right here. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct. So we've talked about this kind of at a broad level, and so now we're presenting with the more details. And our hope is after this discussion, with your support, we would bring forth an AIS in the coming weeks to move forward with this project.
I would like to make sure, because this is going to affect rural Thurston County, although hopefully it's going to be more in the urban area, but I would like to have the public have access to this and see what kind of comments we would get from the public before we would move forward. That's just one point. But what if these folks don't follow the rules? What happens then for those individuals that don't want to follow along with whether their group rules, our rules, the municipal rules, whatever? What action comes into play at this point in time? I mean, can you evict somebody once they've been set up on this kind of a deal? And don't we want these individuals to have access to services? So that kind of limits, if you spread them all around, then they don't have good access to services. A lot of times vehicles don't run and such. So one of the main things is some type of a process to get people into mental health and drug treatment that have chosen this lifestyle, some because it's a choice, some because they've fallen through loophole or the safety net, I guess, and others because of choices they made involving drugs, or then that led maybe to mental things. And so my big concern about this whole thing is it's not that I don't want to help, it's just that I want accountability, and I want the city of Olympia to quit encouraging these people to come from all around the country to our community. And then they're spilling out from the city of Olympia to the rest of the community. And I don't see any way to stop this if they don't change their philosophy about encouraging people to come from all around. So, I mean, that's kind of a broad question statement process that I'm looking at, but I've heard from constituents in the unincorporated area, and they're not in favor of this at all. And how much money can we put into it if we don't have any requirements that you must participate in mental health treatment, drug treatment, whatever it might be, and that you must follow rules? That's asking them to follow the rules. We can all see what happens when we put garbage facilities at the camps. They don't use them. They still, I mean, it looks like a pig pen down there along the lake. Those people don't pick anything up. We put stuff there to do it, and they don't want to kind of police themselves. So what do we have to kind of make it a little better for our community and hold those folks accountable? So that's pretty broad. If you can cover all that in a few minutes, it'll be amazing. So
I got some time. I got some things to say. I've got some things to say.
I'm listening.
We're ahead of schedule, Keely, so take the time.
Oh, don't tempt me. Okay, so I wrote down a couple things to see if I could capture a lot of the, because there are actually quite a number of questions in there. The first is around following rules. So of course, anything that is an illegal activity would still be an illegal activity, regardless of whether they were in a managed encampment or not. If it's illegal, it's illegal, and they would be like any other citizen. They have to be accountable to the law for having broken it. So there's that. Two, there are a couple managed encampments that have created governance, meaning that they work together to create a code of conduct, which would include no use on site if you are a person who is using drugs or alcohol or what have you. And those rules, the principle is we are creating them together, and that there will be follow through. And if you ask some of the service providers that have been involved in these very small versions of this kind of proposal, have the individuals, the residents have held people accountable, have asked them to leave. There have been repercussions for people not following the rules, the code of conduct, because they want to be safe. They want that where they live to be safe, just like any of us. So there would be a code of conduct. There would be an expectation that if you chose to reside there, that you would be following that code of conduct, and there would be consequences if you did not. Service providers would be made available. Right now, each one of these, the two encampments and the Ensign Road, these three pilot projects are in a great place to be our pilot or demonstration projects, because they have at least 4 service providers going out there on a weekly basis: Partners in Prevention Education, Interfaith Works, Navigation Team, CRC, which is Capital Recovery Center, their PATH program, as well as City of Olympia, parking and code enforcement, and Olympia Police Department, and Familiar Faces. So there's a number of service providers that are going out there. This just increases that connection between, and as you read through the proposal, the case managers would be that link that helps them get to their appointment, or is very specifically focused on what is the one barrier that is keeping you from getting your ID? Well, I'm your guy, and I'm going to be working with you on that. So it would just increase that connection. The connections are there, but it would just be that part of that missing link. And then there would be, if somebody is asking for behavioral mental health treatment, there would be the ability for that connection to be made with that intensive case management. So it would not be prescribed. And the reason it would not be prescribed is that these funds are federal, some of them, and some of them are state, and some of them are local. If they're coming from our office, they must be in alignment with guidelines from the state and federal guidelines. Low barrier housing first. I know that is we can go round and round about the definition of what low barrier actually means. It does not mean wild, wild west. It means that there's just no requirements before getting services. That's all that it means. So all of our agencies that receive funding through our office must operate in that way, meaning I'm going to make sure you get your services before I put some requirements on you. So that is just part of being funded through our funding process. That is a requirement, just like it is to be enrolled in coordinated entry. So let's get coordinated entry. Coordinated entry is attached to our funding as well. So ensuring that they get on the wait lists and are prioritized for housing projects. And this has been houselessness has increased, but it is expensive. It's not going to be cheap to get people into housing. Affordable housing is not as available as we would like. And it's going to take some time for us to catch up to the lack of affordable housing for individuals who need it. And so in the meanwhile, we've got to do what we can to get people on their feet when they've been knocked down. So I think I got it all.
I do have a follow-up to your.
Okay.
I guess you mentioned there's going to be consequences. What are those consequences going to be if they don't follow the rules? And another fear of mine is because of that new court ruling that has basically said personal use drugs of any type are okay, and that's undoubtedly going to reflect what we're doing in these areas. So what are the consequences, and do you have any ideas about maybe drug use? Because that's not going to be illegal, it doesn't look like anymore. So I don't know how we're going to deal with it. But
well, I would say that in all shelters in our community, alcohol is something legal that people can do. Smoking cigarettes is something legal, but they are not allowed inside shelters. So that those same rules can apply. That even though this is not an illegal activity or whatever, you cannot do it here. So those are applied, that rule is applied across our entire homeless crisis response system. In terms of what the consequences are, inevitably one of them will be you'll be asked to leave. However, there could be other consequences that could be determined by the case management provider with that group. It could be you stole this person's thing, you're kicked out, or it could be you made a big mess, so now you're on extra chore duty. I don't know. Like those are little programmatic things that will need to be worked out once we have identified a case management site government body or agency to do that work.
Keely, I would like to say though that don't take my questions as that I don't believe that your heart is in the right place. I know that you're trying to do the best you can possibly do given the tools that you have to do that. So I just don't see the tools in place to really solve this problem, and a lot of it has to do with holding people accountable and stuff. So I'll let it go at that for right now. But I would say that I don't think we ought to be given direction on this particular move until the public has adequate time to review what we're contemplating. Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump in. So I just want to say up front that this is completely different program than what we've talked about or contemplated. And when the commissioners authorized $530,000 for an RV site, that was to deal with RVs and getting them off of Ensign Road and Deschutes Parkway, because we all agreed those were terrible locations for the RVs. Providence was having problems with people getting access to their emergency. So now we're talking about, sounds like what we're talking about is not just dealing with RVs, but just dealing with all of the camps. And secondly, we're not talking about moving them anywhere. We're talking about basically institutionalizing the bad locations that the whole program was, the whole authorization for doing something was designed to address. So I got to take this all in because this is all new. I mean, I've been asking Keely you about the status of the RV program. It seems to be something that I was particularly interested in. And when, I was interested in the Carpenter Road, and then you said that that was too many roadblocks, so we're going to look at scattered site. I just thought that meant we were going to do the RV program in 2 or 3, locations in a smaller scale, but it was going to be the exact same goal: get RVs out of the bad locations. Those were the 2 goals: get the RVs somewhere out of really bad locations. And this doesn't do that. So I'm going to have to think about what this is doing and how it connects to, like, broader problems. One question I have is Providence. I mean, are they in agreement with this approach? Because they were kind of the instigator for us to take a drastic action and try to create a, I mean, the original idea was to take City Olympia County property and create a managed RV site there, which was a very big step for the county to think about doing. I felt pretty, proud of the courage of the commission for doing that last fall. And part of it was because Providence was upset and feeling like it was interfering with their operations and the citizens that were there to access their facilities. So has anybody checked in with them about this approach and having sort of a long-term structure around those RVs on Ensign Road?
Hey, Tom, I see you're ready to talk too, but I just wanted to say one thing, that with the county's willingness and the City of Olympia's willingness to provide a property for these RVs, that was you're right, that was huge. That is the only property and the only 2 jurisdictions that are willing to take this on. There's still a major issue around where to place this operation. If we were to wait to find a property that would be able to accommodate this program as it was originally intended, it could take a year or more just to get the will of wherever that park would be on board, getting the will, the political will and the public will, like up to speed on that actually happening in that location. And so that's another huge barrier that we face. And in lieu of that, this is why we came up with this. So I hear you and I understand. But Tom, were you going to say something?
Yeah, and I was just going to kind of build on that under kind of the purpose and goals, kind of number 5 is we still have that goal of identifying that suitable long-term safe parking location. So that's still an ultimate goal. That's because you're right, we do want to move vehicles from kind of where they're not supposed to be to a place where it is more appropriate. So that's still a goal that we're still continuing to look for those sites, and the hope is long-term that we'll be able to identify a location. This is kind of in the meantime that, to manage what we have. City of Olympia has taken the lead in discussions with Providence. So I don't know, Keely, if perhaps you've been involved in any of those discussions. So City of Olympia is on board with this approach. Keith Staley, we've had lots of conversations with Keith Staley and Carrie Retland on this. I can't speak specifically to what the conversations have been between Providence and Olympia around Ensign Road recently. But I know that City of Olympia is on board with this approach, and they've been in contact with Providence.
Chair, could I ask just Tom something real quick to clarify?
Go ahead.
Tom, you said number 5, and unless I misheard what you said, I was trying to find what you were referring to, number 5.
Yeah, so under purpose and goals for a scattered site pilot project, number 5, implement a model.
Where's that at again?
First page.
Oh, okay, number 5, got it. Okay, thank you.
First page on the handout, yeah. So
okay.
Including the operation of a suitable long-term safe parking location. So we are still working towards that goal. We're just working to identify that location.
Thank you.
When you were describing like you were describing the effort to get folks connected, into housing, and I guess my question is like, why should the commission believe that's going to be successful? I mean, it sounded like what Keely's describing is what we've been trying to do for years. Is we've got coordinated entry, and we've got we've got people, we've got outreach, and we're trying to find, we don't have enough affordable housing, but we're trying to locate the sites that we have and get people. So I mean, what's going to be different about this approach that's going to yield any more success. We're going to face all the same barriers to that we do now. I mean, we've been working hard at this for the last 5+ years. What about this approach? What can you tell me about this approach that makes me feel like it's going to yield better success with the ultimate goal, as we say, of getting these folks out of these bad locations and into housing?
So what I would say about that is that many of the outreach efforts, if not most of the outreach efforts, like 90% of the outreach efforts, do not engage in coordinated entry. They are outreach based. They are delivering survival gear. They are delivering meals. Some of like Sidewalk has a foundational community supportive housing program. So they do have case managers that are going out and connecting with individuals and getting them successfully into housing. It's a small effort. So having this group go in and manage that site. So outreach workers are going, PIPE makes over 400 individual contacts per week. They're not having intensive case, they're not case managers, they're advocates. There are very few case managers going out into these encampments, and they are serving the entirety of the encampment population or unhoused population. These would be site-specific, dedicated case managers to each site, enrolling them in coordinated entry directly with the intent of getting them into housing. Again, not all service providers, pretty much only Sidewalk, FCS, and a couple others are actively doing the housing piece. The others are just building rapport, engaging, and getting them survival gear, referring them into other programs. And then also a lot of this work is based on relationship. Any one of us can walk into an encampment and have an exchange, one-on-one exchange. Whether or not that's successful has a lot to do with whether or not they trust you. And so investing in a dedicated staff team that is there on site doing that work with them on a daily or weekly basis, I believe we'll see an increase in successful placements.
Don't we already have more people in coordinated entry than places to put folks?
Sure. Yep, that's absolutely real.
So just creating a longer line, I don't see how that's going to change anything. A longer line for non-existent, housing.
Chair?
There's also, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Chair, could I comment on something?
Go ahead.
I think this is a good example of the process when issues are brought before the board. I have to say, I would have liked to have read this material and I had a time, a little bit to think about it. And so then we could carry on this conversation without trying to read it and carrying on the conversation and listening to staff making the presentation. I'm not being, well, I guess I am being critical because and maybe it's because I missed the boat. Maybe this came in and I didn't get it, but I didn't get it until I walked in here this morning and I obviously didn't have time to read it. But anyway.
I didn't either, so you're not alone, Commissioner.
Okay, I mean, this board has asked staff to make sure we get stuff so we get a little bit of a heads up about what we're going to be discussing. And I think we could do better in our decision-making process if we could have a little heads up here. I don't know exactly what we settled on before, but on items like this, I think we were going to get them on at least on a Thursday, and then if we were going to discuss it on a Tuesday. So I just bring that up because this is a very, very complicated issue. And I know both Keely and Tom, their heart's in the right spot. And for us to come up with, to try and come up with solutions based on their suggestions, I don't think it's fair to them or the people we're trying to serve. So I'm just throwing that out.
Can I ask Commissioner Mejia and Ramiro, were you guys present at the RHC meeting where this was presented?
I was present.
Yep. So,
Can one or both of you characterize the questions, the tenor of the, were there any concerns along the lines that I've been talking about or questions from the RHC?
I'm trying to remember, it was last week.
Maybe I can help.
Okay, go ahead.
It related to your concerns, not necessarily in those terms.
Yeah.
And because this has been in discussions for quite some time, and I apologize if, this piece of paper came to you as part of the packet today, but this is not a new issue. We have been bringing this, and at least conceptually, to the board's attention for the last couple of months. When the consolidated site at the City of Olympia property in Carpenter and Martin Way was not a go, I believe we informed the board that we're going to be looking for a different strategy. So although this paper, yes, was included in your packet this morning, the concept has been brought to you on at least conceptually in the last couple of months. So related to your question, Commissioner Menser of the RHC, no concerns from the way you expressed yours this morning. I think there is a need to do something, and that something may not be addressing every single challenges that we have with this particular matter, but at least this is a way to move forward. Related to this conversation, with all respect, I was not expecting for you to make a decision and put the stamp approval for that. On the agenda includes a direction. What is the direction of the board? You need to have more time. What I'm hearing is more time, and that is part of the direction that I'm looking for, at least the staff is looking for. Please don't take this as that you're going to be in the position to approve this plan today. No, that's not the intent, not the expectation from staff.
Okay, well, I stated before, and I'm going to restate that I have asked about this at least a half a dozen times, and the only information that was provided was that we're going from the consolidated site to a scattered site approach. That's it. So I assumed that it was RVs in one consolidated site to RVs in 2 or 3 different sites. And I understand what Keely's saying about there aren't those sites available, but this is not that. This is a completely new proposal, and so it may be the right thing to do and the best proposal, but just I agree with Commissioner Edwards. We have not seen this. This is completely different than what we authorized funding for, and frankly, I don't think we should be held to any funding decision we made because this is not what we agreed to fund last fall. Commissioner Mejia.
Yeah, and so just to follow through with what Ramiro said in terms of the scattered site management, I think the more of the questions were more of the process of all of this rather than what you've been asking Commissioner Menser and Commissioner Edwards. And in terms of, I think I've had conversations with both Keely and Tom in regards to this, where for me, this is a Band-Aid approach. And I would like to see something more long-term put in place. But just from what I heard at the Regional Housing Council meeting last week, it seems that they are very supportive of heading this direction for now.
Tom, can you walk us through the money in terms of what we were thinking we were going to spend back when this was proposed in the fall, and then what is being proposed now that we spend and where it's coming from, et cetera? I see there's some breakdown on page 3, but can you just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, happy to do that. So we had identified various funding sources to support this type of activity. The first being 2 federal sources. One is our Community Development Block Grant COVID money, and then our Emergency Solutions Grant COVID money. So these were 2 allocations of federal money to address homeless services or other community low and moderate income populations in responding to COVID. We do think this response to COVID help keeping with the hygiene, help keeping people safe where they are. And so those were 2 sources that have come into the county that were one-time sources that we'd identified for this, $150,000 for each of those sources. Under the previous Community Investment Partnership, HHSC body, the 2163 funds, they set aside a pot of emergency funds every year. So we've identified there's remaining 2019 and 2020 emergency funds under the 2163 local document recording fee allocations. And so that was $190,000 of those emergency funds that were identified. And then the final element was back in March, we'd received an emergency housing grant from the Department of Commerce. Those funds expire at the end of June of 2021, and there's still approximately $38,000 remaining in that grant that can be used to support people living in vehicles and other hygiene activities. And so those were the four sources that were initially identified. And then any additional funds we do have, as I've kind of reported to the Regional Housing Council, we've exceeded our document recording fee collections this year over what was projected. So there's the potential for additional 2163 funds that could potentially be available at the board's direction.
Chair, could I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Tom, is there any possibility that as we're trying to fix the situation, could we actually maybe hire some of the people that are faced with this situation and get some of the homeless folks some resources? I mean, they can actually work and maybe clean up these different sites around the community. We could spend some of that money you're referring to possibly. So they would develop some self-worth. They're doing something good. They're getting paid for doing something good. And the community gets to see that we're solving a problem. Because, boy, right now, I mean, as soon as the site gets cleaned up, it's a dump then within a week. And I'd like to see us try to come up with a solution so the community can see we're actually trying to do something. At the same time, maybe create some self-worth among some of the participants we're trying to help them in their endeavor, whatever that might be, and clean up the environment at the same time, because I think some of these places, quite frankly, are a very serious health hazard with rats and such, you know, affecting different neighborhoods and stuff, and actually water quality issues as well. So I'd like to try to get some of these folks involved. As much as I don't think I want to have them all coming here all the time, if they were asked to help, maybe that would help. Maybe some of the real deadbeats would leave then if they didn't want to help. Anyway.
Yeah, I would say certainly, you know, part of this pilot, and it is a pilot, I want to emphasize that, you know, we know this is new and we want to try this out and see if we can be successful, is to better manage the solid waste and the hygiene that happens at these places to reduce that environmental impact, reduce the community. So really hoping that this model with the intensive case management, the site governance, the expectations will improve those areas. So we certainly, you know, that is one of the goals and objectives of this pilot project. In terms of working and hiring and employing residents of the camp, that is certainly, we talked about that. I know through the mitigation site downtown, Catholic Community Services, as they've been building the micro shelters, have worked to employ some of the folks they've had. And I looked at Keely, who may know a little bit more, some kind of mixed success with that approach. So that's something that certainly has been discussed, and there's potential for further discussions around that.
Does this connect to the money that Lot pledged to go and fund a program for pumping the septics, or the, whatever you call them, from the RVs?
Yes.
Yeah, so actually we did, Keith Staley, City of Olympia, yes. So Lot has pledged $50,000 to help pump RVs. And so that would be connected to the site management services for these sites. So that would be a component under the site management element of this.
And am I reading here that it says the RHC commits to providing $500,000 of 2163 to fully fund for 1 year. So how does that money connect to the money broken down above that breaks down the 530? Is that in addition to, or how does that?
Yeah, that would be in addition to. We initially thought of a 6-month pilot, and whether that would get us through 6 months. And so if that would be based on what we see as the need of the cost. So we wanted to this to last for 1 year. So the potential up to an additional 500,000 if needed, depending on what we see as the actual cost.
Yeah, and that request for additional funding was presented to the Regional Housing Council last week to consider a 1-year pilot, because in 1 year, it really is, in terms of the length of time, will allow to evaluate the effectiveness or not of this pilot project. So perhaps what I'm hearing is the board needs additional time, both for the public to review this document, which is available online, and also for the board members to review this document as well in this proposal. So would you like 2 weeks, a week? How long would you like to have to review this before I bring this back to for a formal direction?
Commissioner Mejia, any suggestion there?
And also in the meantime, I'm sorry, Keely and Tom are available to each board member to answer any questions that you may have outside of this forum.
I'll just go one by one. Commissioner Mejia, do you have a suggestion as to when this should come back for the board, this direction?
No, I think it would be good for all of us to have conversations with Keely and Tom and to read the Scatter Site Management Pilot Project, the proposal, and then come back and make a decision about it.
Commissioner Edwards, do you have a suggestion? 2 weeks or?
I'm actually good with the recommendations Commissioner Mejia made.
When do you want it to come back then, Commissioner Mejia? A week? 2 weeks?
Yeah, a week. I mean, that's fine with Tom and Keely. Are we on a deadline?
There's not the hard deadline other than just the sense of urgency to move forward once we have an approach that everyone's comfortable with. But there's no hard deadline.
Okay.
If the commissioners agreed with this approach, how long from that point to implementation? Are there other steps that would have to follow?
So the first step is we would issue an RFP to identify the case management contractor, the service provider. So we'd come with you with an AIS to request permission to issue that RFP. We'd get it on the street as quickly as possible, and then there's probably 2 to 3 weeks while it's out. So we are probably 2 to 3 months away from having a contract in place with people on the ground carrying out this work.
Okay.
I guess if possible, knowing what we're always up against, what's chances if we give it 2 weeks or something and then get back together?
Given the complexity of this, I think I'm going to agree with Commissioner Edwards. Let's plan to do the work we need to do. The commissioners have heard and asked a lot of questions, and let's have the conversations that we need to have, and the public will get a chance to chew on it. And let's have this back for 2 weeks from today, with the intent that the board will give direction on this.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
And for the sake of time, is there any chance we could make sure if we're individually going to meet with Keely and Tom that we could do that together so we don't have separate meetings? I mean, I realize we have the open public meetings deal with more than one commissioner, so if 2 commissioners get together, but if I'm going to meet with Tom and Keely, I'd like to do it at the same time if I could, if we could coordinate that.
The 2 of them, you mean with you, or you with the other commissioners?
What was that, sir?
Are you saying to meet with Keely and Tom together at the same time with you, or are you talking about between commissioners?
Oh, well, I don't care either way. I mean, but if we're going to have meetings, let's have them both there rather than, we said we're going to talk to Keely or Tom. Well, if I'm going to do that, I'd like to talk to both of them at the same time.
Yeah, so we'll work with your assistants to make sure that they coordinate that meeting.
Thank you very much.
Keely and Tom will be available at the same time to each one of you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So
thank you, guys.
I will bring this in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence, commissioners.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. I'm glad we had time to really get into that. LP Brown is next. Our favorite topic.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. I know that those two particular properties are related to code compliance. And I believe the board members are aware of the nuances, not necessarily Commissioner Mejia, because that's a little history that carries a couple of years at least. What I ask the staff is to give you a verbal update as to the status to where we are on those particular properties. And just to frame the issue a little bit, code compliance is one of the complex elements the county does. And it's, in one hand, we enforce the code, we enforce everything that we believe that any property owner should obey by, but at the same time, we need to strike a balance as to how the property owners have their own rights within their own property. So within the two elements of enforcing a code and having the property owners having the right within their own property, that becomes the challenge. And that becomes a little bit time consuming. I don't want to bring you the Kaiser Road compliance of nuisance property that we did for almost 20 years. I know that is an extreme, but that will give you an indication how complex and time consuming this particular element of code compliance is within the county business. So today I ask Josh and Brett to come and give you a little more in detail of those two properties. Maybe for the benefit of Commissioner Mejia, if they can provide a little history on those two, and then we'll provide you with a status as to where we are.
Great. Thank you, County Manager. So yes, thank you. This is code compliance, and of the services that CPED provides, this is one of the very complicated services we provide. This conversation is to lay the groundwork for ongoing conversations with the Board of County Commissioners. There's no expectation of a decision, but we will be coming back periodically because there will be some decision points as we look at some of these cases that are rather complex. I'd like to make sure that just in terms of that groundwork, I'm going to start really high level with compliance and then kind of work our way down to there's three difficult cases that I'd like to review with the Board of County Commissioners. In terms of framework, our compliance at Thurston County is what we call cooperative compliance. Per the board approved Title 26, the goal is for our staff that's within Brett's group, CPED Development Services. Actually, let me back up. I'm Joshua Cummings, the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development, CPED. And with us is Brett Burris, the Development Services Manager for CPED. And within CPED, Development Services is the compliance sector. The compliance sector currently has 3 positions. At the beginning of 2020, we had only one of those positions filled. And then we went through a hiring freeze with the COVID. And then as of the end of 2020, we now have all 3 of those positions filled. So for the entire county, there's 3 humans that work on compliance issues in a cooperative way. So that means we work to balance the respect of property owners' property rights with the concerns of neighbor citizens or complaints that we receive. Compliance at Thurston County is a complaint-driven sector. That means that we're not driving around looking for violations in terms of the way that people are using their property or potential derelict properties. We only react when we receive input from neighbors or citizens or others that alert us to the fact that there might be a violation. And compliance kind of falls under 2 main headings. There's the misuse of a property, potential misuse of a property within code and ordinance. So that's somebody using, their farm for, I don't know, say like a tourist attraction and a wedding venue. And the neighbors call us and say, you can't run a business on this property. And so we go take a look and see if there's a potential violation. If there is, we write a notice of violation and work with that property owner to come into compliance with our codes and ordinances. Those often have the potential to come to the Board of County Commissioners as a land use issue. And so we work really hard to make sure that we're very narrow in that conversation with the Board of County Commissioners. The other main heading is the kind of derelict properties. So properties that have been abandoned or they're run down and they cause a nuisance in terms of potential rats or infestations or dangerous areas that kids might want to get into. Those derelict properties are so far down the path that they likely will not be coming to the board for land use issues, but will be headed towards the court system. And so that's what we're going to focus on today and have three kind of main examples. And there's three examples have three different varying successes in the process. I want to also ensure that we're aware in 2018, CPED banded together with the commissioner's assistance to create the CRG. CRG stands for Citizens Response Group. What we had recognized is lots of complaints were coming in different avenues, and we were having crossed wires. And so in an effort to be more consistent with our messaging and to have a more consecutive approach to these topics, we got together and looked at all of the different potential issues that the commissioner's office had been receiving, that we were receiving, that we were working on, and have really created a strong coordination. So if you talk to your assistants about the CRG, that's led by Brett and Craig Challam, and then it also includes public health and public works. That communication has created a lot of success. Just some big broad numbers of CRG success. This is not including all of the compliance cases, but the ones that have been before the CRG. Since 2018, approximately 225 BOCC inquiries have been made at the CRG, and 172 of those have been resolved. 53 are still in process, and 3 of those were deemed difficult properties. So they were past the point of likely cooperative compliance and needed to head towards the court system. And so I want to share my screen if I can and bring up those 3 different properties so you have a visual. Is that possible? Where is the share button? Share screen. Okay. Do you have special cases in varying degrees of success on your screen? Yes? Okay.
Yep.
Now it should be a slideshow, yes? It should just
Still showing the slide within the frame of the toolbars and whatnot.
Okay, how about now?
No change. We can see the slide well.
Okay, good. If you can see it, that's great. So the first one, so I took the addresses out, but each one of these is an example of when we get to a place of needing to engage a potential abatement, which is a cleanup of a property, and that requires court action. And so we work with the prosecuting attorney's office to file the court action that leads us to hopeful cleanup. You sure you can't make it bigger, commissioners? Is that? Let's see what I can do here. Does that do anything?
No.
I'll just go through it because it's actually the pictures are the most important part. If you can see the pictures, then you're good to go. So first one is the Carline Beach property. This is a property that was out off of off of Steamboat Island, and went through trying to contact the property owner and back and forth, and finally the board directed our staff to pursue court proceedings on abatement. We were relayed to the property owner that we were going to start filing court action. That property owner took it upon themselves to clean up the property. That compliance case was resolved. So that is a huge success in terms of we get some direction that says you're going to have some court proceedings, and that really ignites the property owner to do what they need to do to complete it.
What was the length of time on that?
That is a good question. Do you have that at the tip of your fingers there, Brett?
Brett Burris with Community Planning and Economic Development. I know that it's longer than 2 years. This case was in process when I arrived in March 25 of 2019.
Yeah, you know, the county manager hinted at Kaiser Road project, which took 30 years because it had gone back and forth and there was so much confusion. Carline Beach, from our perspective, once we got on the case in 2018, took about a year and a half, but there's a lot of history that occurred way before we got on the case, Commissioner Edwards. And so that's kind of the tough part about this is CPED, which used to be Resource Stewardship, jumped into this just about 3 years ago. And so our timeline is much shorter than the actual community's timeline. So Carline Beach, I think Brett's right on that, was about 5 years, including our year and a half to get to success.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, thanks.
Great. So count number one, that's a success. Number two, Single Tree Estates property. This is out toward Bald Hills, off Bald Hills Road. This one, the community out there would say that it's been ongoing for about 15 years, that this property has been in different states of disrepair. There was a compliance case that was opened back in 2007. The property owner did some things at that time to clear up the violation, so that was closed. And then it essentially became a re-violation in 2017.
Could I comment on that, being you're given a time frame?
Sure.
I think it's been about 20 years and it was never fixed. For some reason, the county, something happened. Let's just put it that way. I want to commend you guys for doing good, but that's about a 20-year-old case.
That's great. And so that goes exactly to my point. Our time frame is much more about the present, but there is so much history and all these difficult cases that we understand that.
Yeah, and Commissioner Edwards is correct. Is a long history on this one, and I think it's what you alluded, Josh, is the property owner, when it was notified, did something at the time, somewhat address some of the concerns of the instances, but it was a reoccurrence on a couple of occasions. It becomes a little difficult to do that. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And it's that back and forth, you know, as we started this conversation, it's the balance between the complaint and the violation and the respect for property rights. And, you know, working with the code, it can take a long time. And what we've tried to do in CPED in the past few years is to provide a more consistent path, which is how we've gotten to success thus far, which wasn't able to achieve the past 20 or 30 years on these properties. So thank you for that. That's a very important piece. So Single Tree Estates itself, you can see there, we have a potential partner with the Single Tree Estates Homeowners Association. They've been extremely engaged in helping to ensure that we find a path forward. Our team has been working hard to contact the property owner. There's been some back and forth with the property owner. And then it really picked up pace when we received direction from the board last year to abate the property, which means clean up, take the reins to clean up. To go onto a property to even start that cleanup process requires a court order. That court process started in February 2020, and obviously we're all aware of the global pandemic. But despite the global pandemic, the prosecuting attorney's office continued to work with the court actions. There's all sorts of filings, there's notices in the newspaper, lots of different steps that go into the process that leads up to the prosecuting attorney filing for a motion for an order of abatement, which was done in November of 2020. The courts, as you all know, are reviewing items, but things are still difficult. They were able to sign that warrant of abatement in February of 2021, so that's just last month. And there's 6 months that we have to continue to work with the property owner or find a path forward in cleaning up the property and incurring those costs. So that's really where we are right now. As of 3 weeks ago, you can see in that picture, the property owner did remove that trailer. So that trailer is no longer there. So that's a success in process, but there's still a lot to be done. And like I said, I'm not asking for a decision from the board today. But there is a path where CPED is continuing the conversation with the homeowners association in terms of the bids that we need to get for the cleanup, and then the actual who pays the costs once we know what the cost of cleanup will be. We in CPED have no dedicated fund for compliance cleanup. So there is a piece where the actual action needs to be funded, whether by the homeowner association, the property owner, or potentially a fund from the county. Again, no decision at this time. We're working with the property owner. From my perspective, internally, like I had said, we are seeing some participation from the property owner, but I don't want that clock to get so far down to that August 2021 deadline before we have decided what needs to be done next. Because once that warrant expires, we have to start the court proceedings all the way over again. And so this is why I'm talking to you guys and having this conversation with the Board of County Commissioners to make sure that this is in your head, that you know that we're working on it in CPED.
Maybe I could just comment on that,
Sure.
Now that they did remove the trailer, it looks twice as bad, because now you can look right at the mess of the house falling down and where the kids sneak in and out and all that. So removing the trailer did not help the community in the least. I don't even know if the homeowner took it or if somebody took it on themselves to tow it away, but it's festering in the community again for 20 years, so I'm hoping we can get there. Thank you for what you are doing, though.
Oh, no, yeah, we are doing it. You're right. Thank you for that recognition. And then the last one is the property near LP Brown Elementary. So this one we have connected with the Olympia School District since it is adjacent to that property. Again, it's always good to try and find a potential partner. This one is a little more difficult in terms of, let me go back. So when we do have a potential property owner that is conversant and is kind of working with the prosecuting attorney's office, we believe that abatement is the best path forward to honor their property rights. And, we've already seen some success in that. LP Brown Elementary, we have not seen much success in having conversations with the property owner. And so it's taken us a little more time to think clearly on what the next steps should be, because instead of just cleaning it up towards abatement, there is a conversation that needs to be had about condemnation. And condemnation, which the county manager can get more in depth with, he's had more experience on this, would, instead of just abating it and cleaning it up and the property owner rights are retained by the property owner, condemnation requires a need for eminent domain, and then also the county will take that property on. So that's a much bigger, in terms of a court process, it's a much longer and longer process through the courts, and more expensive, and just lots of different liability things to take into consideration. So we will be, I'm putting together a more clear slide on abatement versus condemnation. We're not quite there yet. We're working with our prosecuting attorney's office, but I will be seeking direction from the Board of County Commissioners in the coming weeks on what type of court action you'd like for the PAO to file. Will that court action be to abate or to condemn? And just getting a more full picture for you is my task at this time. So those are kind of, like the Commissioner Edwards has said, these are big and they take a long time, and we appreciate the opportunity in the past 3 years to take a more coordinated approach in service to our citizens. We're available for any questions, any thoughts, and Brett is here with more details. Did I miss anything, Brett?
Thank you, Josh. No, you did an excellent job of summarizing the 3 difficult properties.
Could I ask a question there, Chair?
Yes, sir.
There is a property out on the Deschutes River at Vale Road, and I think it's Vale Cutoff Road. And boy, is that a rat's nest. I'm not so sure the community didn't take it on themselves to burn down what they call the residents out there. I really don't know what happened, but there was a pretty serious fire. And have we got anything going on that mess? And it is a mess.
I think that we can engage with your assistant. If it's a big mess, hopefully she's brought it up at the CRG, and we can give you an update.
Okay, thank you.
Josh, what is the CRG for the public?
Again, it's the CRG is the Citizens Response Group that I referred to earlier.
Okay, thank you.
in that citizens response group, again, is the 3 departments engaged in land use and building, which is CPED, Community Planning and Economic Development, Public Health, Public Works, meeting with the Board of County Commissioners assistants to go through any cases within their districts that they have specific concerns about. And that was a process improvement that came out of the lean training back in 2018 is when we began that. So again, appreciate the support from the county commissioners. These aren't easy. The X factor here is that it's all about humans. If a property owner has let their property get in this disrepair, our compliance people are often dealing with deceased relatives, hard times economically, all sorts of human factors that are engaged in this. And so if there aren't any questions, I want to just take a quick moment to say thank you to the compliance team, led by Craig Challam and our 2 other employees, covering the entire county on these derelict properties, but also on the potential misuse of properties is a big job for 3 people. And I really appreciate the work that they do and the support that's provided by the Board of County Commissioners.
So Josh, I'd be curious, you know, not creating a research project for you or anything, but at some point, if we talk about these issues, like I'd be curious, we're always interested in other jurisdictions and how they do things, whether it's fees or whether it's process. This is an area where I'd be curious, you know, what does Kitsap's County Compliance Department look like? What is Pierce County per capita? You know, are we completely out of the box? 3 seems like not very many for the amount of, you know, miles and population, but I don't know. I definitely like the cooperative approach. I guess I like the cooperative, no matter how many people we had, I'd like the cooperative approach to a point, but then, you know, when we get to that point where that's not working, then I'd like to see the county be efficient, you know, and not letting things linger for the community because we're not able to, you know, to provide the service. Because there comes a point where you're not going to, you can tell, as you say, you're not going to get the result you want through cooperation. So at that point, I'd like us to have the efficiency that we need to do a good job for the citizens. And if that means we have to think about, you know, a different model for the staffing or whatnot, then that's something that the board should at least be aware of. I mean, obviously you guys were operating on like 1 person for a while, so it's, you know, hopefully it'll be better than it has been here in the last few years. But
thank you for that, Commissioner. And I mean, you're right on the efficiency we're building right now. That these 3 projects. So Title 26 was just recently passed by a previous Board of County Commissioners. We use that cooperative compliance. That number of the 225 cases from the board down to resolved 172. That's your real success right there. That's the carrots, right? The cooperative compliance. And then those 3 that we discussed, that's more the stick. And that's where we haven't rested on our laurels in the past 2.5 or so years. We've really got the process and the efficiency moving towards an outcome. The big hurdle is going to be that we have no money. We're pushing all of these forward to a place where there isn't a dedicated compliance fund. And so finding...
Yeah, okay. Thank you for reminding me. I knew there was another little string of what I wanted to say, and that was it. Is that, you know, even if we have the compliance staffing we need, we still have to deal with that last bucket that you just pointed out, is how to pay for the repairs that our efficient compliance staff is getting cases resolved. So it surprises me, frankly, that that hasn't been. I don't know if Robin can give historical perspective. Has there ever been a county budget item for like cleanup and abatement and all that kind of stuff, or is it always just a check written out of the general fund on an as-needed basis?
So in the years that I've been in the county, a little over 11 years now, there have been conversations about establishing an abatement account, but every time this has come up, the Board of County Commissioners at that time has decided to not create an abatement fund. And to my knowledge, the county has not paid for abatement on a property. That may have happened prior to 2010, but since then, I'm not aware of the county paying for property cleanup. There are some options that the board has. One option that I think that we did pursue at one point is to establish a lien against the property so that when the property is eventually sold, that the county could recoup its money from the sale of the property. But it's a long-range view, and boards that have discussed that have chosen to not do the initial investment. But it is certainly your option. Elizabeth has told us that it would have to be a general fund expense. And for the last 11 years, no board has opted to do that.
And I thank you, Robin. And I might say, in fairness, the steps that we just talked about, the actual approval of Title 26 and then the implementation of it that we just over the past couple of years have done, it hasn't been quite this process oriented in the past. So it has the clarity on how much may be needed and what have we done previous to that. How do you get the cooperative compliance first? That really was a missing piece of the puzzle. And so I think we're moving towards having more clarity on what we actually need in that fund and the amount and the mechanisms that go to using that fund, what it's for. Like Robin said, is it for a lien process? Is it the cleanup? Is it all the way to condemnation? Those are big conversations to have. They haven't been able to be had because we needed the process more tight. And I really appreciate that Brett and his team have gone further than start. We're almost to that place where we need some direction.
Commissioner Mejia, do you have anything for this topic?
No, sir, just learning.
Yeah, it's an interesting area. I thought there was a property that the county abated. Like, if I remember right, it was like District 3 toward the South County, maybe Little Rock Road or Sergeant Road or somewhere down there. There was like a big cleanup. It was like you guys presented it as a success, like maybe a couple years ago, a big cleanup that took forever.
The county partnered with the woman who purchased the property, okay, but essentially the cost was hers.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's the one I'm remembering then. Okay. Anything else, Josh?
No, more to come, but just wanted to make sure to lay the groundwork for the board. We didn't want to surprise you.
All right. Good. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Josh. Okay. Item 10.3 is public testimony.
Yeah, as I mentioned, Commissioners, I'm still working with staff to see what would be the response to Ms. Dilworth's comments that she provided last week. So I don't know if I'm going to be ready to provide that response this afternoon, but certainly next week, as the only pending testimony that I have.
Okay, and then Commissioners' items. We have 15 minutes or so. Anybody has a Commissioner item that needs addressing? I don't think I have anything. I'm looking at my list.
I do have a couple, but I'll defer to my seatmate if she does.
I do not.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Maybe this would be for Robin. So what was the return on your questioning elected officials about budget, the 1 or 2 year business?
So I sent that email out and I got 4 replies, 3 in favor of biennial and 1 annual.
Okay.
And we'll bring the decision point next week, I believe, correct, Robin?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe you can send them a reminder. Excuse me.
I wanted to throw out to Robin, since it's just something I heard in passing at WASAC. It had to do with, I'm just going to, hopefully this means more to you than it means to me, but I thought it caught my attention. Something about calculating the lost gas tax revenue and like some of these federal relief funds being able to buttress your road fund if you can calculate your lost gas tax revenue. And I know we're struggling so much with road funds, and I know we've got other things we might want to do with that funds, but just making sure we know all the options and all the possibilities. I just wanted to throw that out there because I had not heard or thought of that as a use of federal relief before.
We have considered looking at the lost gas taxes. We are looking line by line at potential lost revenue rather than an overarching amount of revenue received. If we looked at just the bottom line revenue, we couldn't claim anything as lost. But the American Rescue Plan appears to allow us to do line item losses. So gas tax, we didn't issue passports. We have decreased court fees. We're looking at every revenue item line by line to see what we can claim was lost. And then the question becomes, do we have to put that money into the fund that the revenue would have gone in, or can it all be deposited into the general fund? So we are exploring those things.
Commissioner Edwards, you got another one?
I just wonder, do we have something coming up about the lake management districts and possibly helping lake management districts to succeed, or is that a little bit on the horizon? I guess it'd be towards the county manager to.
Yeah, the direction that I got from the board is to organize a briefing, and that's I'm in the process of scheduling a briefing, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. And I guess to the, on that process issue, I guess, not to beat a dead horse, but using the scattered homeless issue, are we headed towards getting more information earlier? I guess that's, I can put it.
Yeah, we always are going to continue to strive to do that, Commissioner.
Okay. On all of our ordinances and such that we do review to make changes for whatever the process might be, do we use that group MRSC to get examples from them so we don't have to reinvent the wheel? I guess I'd just.
Yeah, all the time.
All the time?
All the time.
Okay.
Are you talking about e-signatures, Commissioner?
Well, no, just about everything that when we make adjustments, rather than trying to readjust, reinvent the wheel, we can go to that group and get some good examples of what seems to be working.
Yep, all the time.
Okay, I don't want to.
Common practice.
Thank you.
Lawyers are good at knowing exactly where to go to steal things.
Right.
So I'm sure that's happening. Okay, great. Well, it's 11:48. Any other items before we adjourn? Robin, Miro,
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. We'll see each other back at 2 p.m. We're in adjournment.